All right, let's get right into this. We're looking at a tale of two histories today, a real clash of ideas. On one hand, you've got this incredible modern mystery that's literally buried right under our feet in our oldest cities. And on the other, you have this well-documented story of a scientific revolution that played out in public for everyone to see. It's a fascinating look at two completely different ways to read the past. So, our story kicks off in Boston back in 1889. A maintenance worker is down in a basement, doing his job, when he stumbles upon something that just shouldn't be there. Behind a crumbling wall, he finds a complete, beautifully ornamented window, buried 12 feet underground. A window that was clearly designed to let in light and be seen, but it was facing nothing but tons of packed earth.
And here's the thing. This discovery, it wasn't just some weird one-off event. It turns out this was just the tip of the iceberg of a really strange architectural mystery that you can find in cities all over the globe.
Yeah, once you start looking, this puzzling pattern pops up everywhere. We're talking Cleveland, Edinburgh, Sydney, Manchester. It's the same story. Entire ground floors of gorgeous old buildings, complete with fancy storefronts and doorways, are now just basements. And what's really odd is that for a lot of these, there are no clear city records explaining how or why this massive change happened. So this is the real head-scratcher. Think about it. Architects, especially back then, were all about showing off. They spent fortunes on these elaborate, beautiful details that were meant to be seen from the street. So why in the world would anyone go to all that trouble and expense just to bury it all? It just makes absolutely no sense. Well, a mystery this big is bound to attract some equally big explanations. And the first one we're going to look at is a pretty wild one, known online as the mud flood theory. The idea is, well, it's huge. Proponents believe that sometime in the 19th century, a single cataclysmic event, a mud flood, happened all over the world. It supposedly dumped unbelievable amounts of soil and mud, instantly raising street levels everywhere and turning all those beautiful ground floors into the basements we see today. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. This mud flood theory often connects to an even more epic story, the idea of a lost, forgotten global empire called Tartaria. So, according to this hypothesis, Tartaria was this incredible, technologically advanced worldwide civilization. They were the ones who built all of these grand, magnificent structures that we now find partially buried. The mud flood, in this version of events, wasn't just some random disaster, it was the cataclysm that destroyed this empire, which was then supposedly scrubbed from our history books on purpose. Those buried buildings, they're the last clues we have. This brings up a really, really important question, though. If a global empire was actually wiped off the map and entire cityscapes were changed forever, would it really happen without anyone writing it down? Would it be completely silent? To get some perspective, let's look at another huge historical shift and see how people reacted. Yeah, to answer that, we're going to jump back to the 18th century and look at a different kind of revolution. The introduction of a brand new and very controversial piece of tech, the lightning rod. So check this out. In Siena, Italy, when they decided to put a lightning rod on the main town tower, it was a massive deal. It was anything but a secret. A local nobleman wrote a whole public attack against it, sparking this huge debate. When the first big thunderstorm rolled in, a crowd actually gathered to watch what would happen. And when the rod worked perfectly, a physics professor wrote up an official report that got published right in the local newspaper. It was a public event with a very public paper trail. And this wasn't just happening in Siena. All across Italy, these famous towers became the sites for very visible, very public, and often very heated scientific experiments. Installing a lightning rod was big news. It was debated, documented, and written about for everyone to see. It left a clear record. Okay, so keeping that idea of a paper trail in mind, let's circle back to Tartaria and see what the historical records, specifically old maps, can actually tell us about it. What historians and map experts will tell you is that Tartaria was never actually an empire. It was a name, a label that European mapmakers used for a gigantic, vaguely understood part of Asia. Honestly, you can think of it like a geographical placeholder, kind of like the old maps that would say, "Here be dragons," for areas they just hadn't explored yet. And you can actually trace the history of this word. It started as the name for a specific group, the Tartars. Then, when the Mongols invaded Europe, Europeans started associating the name with them, and they even corrupted it to Tartar because it sounded like Tartarus, the Greek version of hell. Eventually, it just became this catch-all term on maps for that giant unknown land over there. As people explored more, they filled in the map with real names, and the label Tartaria just faded away. So this all leads us to two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. Two completely different frameworks for how we interpret the clues the past leaves behind for us. Okay, so on the one hand, you have what we can call the anomaly framework. This way of thinking starts with the physical mystery itself, those buried windows. The fact that there aren't official records is seen not as a lack of evidence, but as evidence of a cover-up. So a new grand story is created to explain everything at once. Then you have the documentary framework. This one starts with the written records, newspapers, city plans, letters. From this perspective, the lack of records for a massive global mud flood is seen as pretty good proof that it probably didn't happen that way. Instead, it explains the buried buildings with smaller, local events that were documented, like in Chicago, where they famously raised the entire city's street level in the 1850s and wrote the whole thing down.
And that really leaves us right at the heart of this whole thing. We have physical evidence that is, you have to admit, undeniably strange. And at the same time, we have a historical record that on this specific topic is mostly silent. So the question is, when there's a gap between what we can literally see and touch and what we can read in the history books, which story do we choose to believe? That's the challenge these two tales leave us with.